Hi guys and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about BedBug's crusty bottom. Oh, that sounded so weird. So today I'd like to address the situation we've got with Project BedBug's crusty floor pans. I'm going to have to show you what is going on. So floor pans on Beetles, any vehicle actually, are pretty important. They hold your body inside the car. But not only that, on a Beetle you can see there that the seat subframe is welded to the floor. So the floor has to be super strong, otherwise the seat won't be bolted down. So I'm a big fan of tidy floor pans. I do think they look great, but more importantly, it's the strength. It's not how it looks. And over the years with these old cars, people would have chopped and changed bits of floor pan or even changed the whole lot due to rust or damage. And BedBug is no exception. Somebody has gone in there and they've done some repairs, but the way they've done it is what's interesting. So the front driver's side here, you can see that the pan itself is very rusty. I mean, obviously somebody at some point has put a lick of paint on it, but there's not really much you can do with this section here apart from replace it as it's rotten. But it's the rear section that interests me the most. As you can see from a first glance, it looks pretty good. But then you look closely and there's a whopping great gap along here and along this edge here. And it doesn't stop there. You'll notice that there are rivets on this floor pan and seems to be a distinct lack of welding. And it's a little bit difficult to see, but this here is actually a section of pan that's just been put over a hole and then riveted into place. Here on the passenger side, it's just as interesting. You can see here the pans are actually in pretty good condition. It looks like somebody's cut it there, and there's a rear section and front section. They're a bit crusty, but somebody has replaced these in the past. But here's the funny thing with this pan. They've managed to install the whole pan without any welding at all. There's some witness marks here of some drilled holes where they've kind of screwed it together, but it was glued in. So with not much effort with my pry bar, I just managed to break the seal on this glued area all the way around. And what they've done is they've just chopped out the rusted section of pan and just plopped this pan in there with a bit of glue and perhaps some screws and rivets. But as I mentioned before, this is the seat runner. This is where your seat bolts onto the car. And as you can see, well, it's slightly dangerous. So with the pan looking like this on the passenger side, the answer is simple. Just rip it out and put a new pan in. But in this situation, the front section and the rear section of this floor pan is in pretty good condition, and I think it can be used again. So what I'm going to try and do is rescue these two parts and see if I can reinstall them back into the car properly. And I'm not entirely sure how this is going to work yet. If I do find that I'm wasting too much time faffing about, I'm just going to order a complete pan and install that. But as I said, this pan here is in pretty good shape, and it would be great just to fit it properly. So that's the pan removed on this side, and I think I've actually achieved the fastest pan removal of a Beetle ever done. So with that pan removed, we can really see what is going on inside here. You can see that they've cut these sections of floor pan out. This is actually the original pan that's still in position along with this return edge here. No attempt was made to remove all of the old pan. And what it looks like after the old pan was kind of removed out the way, they've just pushed a new section of pan on there and just bonded it or glued it into position. So if I do want the pan to sit flat against this spine along this tunnel, I'm going to have to remove all of this old floor pan and along the front, and also cut this section back here. So here are the removed panels, and the condition itself isn't so bad. I may be able to reuse these, but you can see just how much sealant they've used just to hold these into position. But to be honest, even with all that sealant, it really wasn't doing the job. And when you do buy panels like this, they do have a return edge here with the holes that bolt up underneath the side of the heater channel, and you can see here, that's what I mean. There is one of these kind of sections like that. My panel has been cut along this line here, so I'm missing this section. But luckily enough for me, this section that's missing on the floor pan repair, the one that I've got on the car, is in pretty good condition, so I feel happy just using this original return lip and try and weld the pan back into its position along this line.
Japanese crows are renowned for their problem-solving skills, particularly in utilizing man-made objects and interacting with humans.
So I've just been beavering away, trying to save that floor pan on the Project BedBug. And here's what I've been getting on with. On the inside of the car here, I've had to clean up all the old bits of metal and sealant that are along this spine here. And what I've also done is I've just drilled the back here on this cross member as well. So you can see here just how much crud I've had to remove. This is bits of the old floor pan, the original floor pan that was still stuck on the spine, along with all that sealant. And just here's the front section of that floor pan that I removed, and what I had to do is just extend the side here about 1 inch, and I've also hole punched it. What I've also done is I've chopped out a section just underneath this subframe here, which well, it looked a bit like this here, this rotten mess. I don't need that. And on the inside of the pan, I've just started cleaning it up a bit. A lot of this is to do with when I get to paint it, it's going to be less prep work. And it's a similar story with the rear part of the pan. I've just hole punched this edge here. Yet again, I did have to add about 1 inch of material back onto this side of the pan. So now those pan halves are cleaned up, front and rear, I can now refit them. But this time I can refit them a bit better. I can actually weld them into position. So you can see where I've hole punched this panel here, it lines up with this spine. So when these are plug welded, that'll be super strong along this edge. And the underside of this panel, I can actually plug weld from underneath because I've already drilled the holes. And on the underside, you can see this is the pan here and this is the original return edge. And what I'm going to do is just weld this back on here. So I'm going to go ahead and start welding this back into position, and then I can install the front part of this panel along with the seat subframes, which should sit about here and here. And then along this edge here, all I'll do is, well, I'm just going to weld it across to join the two panels. So on this side of the floor panel, it was just the case of removing the pans, seeing what I had, modifying them slightly, then refitting them into their correct position using what I already had. So at this point, the panels are tacked into position and I'm pretty happy with the way they fit now. And more importantly, the seat subframe is now welded to the floor. I mean, of course, I've still got some more welding to do, some grinding to do, and then we've got to make all this look pretty. To be honest, I'm a big fan of the Flintstones. But I just don't think it'd be very practical. So this side just needs a little bit more finishing off, but what I really want to do is I want to start checking out the driver's side because there's some horror stories there as well. So starting at the front, this is a very original floor pan, complete with great big holes. So there's not a lot I can do with that very heavily rusted floor pan. I mean, obviously I could put a repair section in, but I'd prefer to fit a new panel like this one here. But the biggest problem is actually this rear panel that has been replaced. But if you look closely, there is a riveted patch here. This section here has just been dropped into position. It's not even lined up to the floor up here either. More rivets. Yeah, it's very badly fitted. You can see there's a whopping great gap here. So the first thing I need to do is take this panel out. And underneath on this side, you can really see what is going on. The panel itself is not sat flat at all. In fact, there's a great big gap here. This is actually part of the original panel here, and this is where the panel's just been dropped in on top, but it's not actually fitted at all. And you can see here, this is the panel that we just fitted. It's actually flat along here, nice and flush like this, and this is what it's supposed to look like. So here's the section of the back panel, and to be honest, it's in pretty good shape. It does look like a new panel, but just badly fitted and then secured with 4 rivets. And just like the other side, I'd like to fit it in the same manner, but you can see here somebody has cut off the return edge that goes along here and also down the side. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to just put an extension piece like I did on the other side. And once I've made that panel slightly wider, I can get rid of all this rotten section here. All this can come off because this is part of the new panel, including this crusty bit down here. So I can go ahead and start removing this section now. So I've just been cutting out that floor section. There was a knock at the door and a parcel's just arrived. Let's get that unboxed. So what we've got is a pair of hinges and some screws for a VW bus engine lid. I'm thinking of using an engine lid off a bus on the back of this pickup build. And here we have some adjusters for the beam. The customer wants the front beam to be adjustable and narrowed. And not only that, I've got a inner door repair panel for the passenger side, as my one is looking a bit rotty. So what I've done is I've removed all the old pieces of the floor pan around this area here, bare metal the top here, and I've also drilled out this back cross member. And this actually gives you an idea of how much material should have been removed when that pan was fitted, and all this stuff was, well, it was still on there. But interestingly enough, there's no sealant, it was just held in with rivets. And here's that rear section of the pan, and what I've done is, yet again, I've had to extend this area here where somebody had cut it quite short, probably added about an inch, but not only that, they'd also cut off this return edge here, so I've added probably about an inch on the back there as well. I've also hole punched down this edge here so I can re-plug weld it to the spine, and at the front here, I've just welded up some of the incisions that somebody had cut in the sides. And now that that extra bit of material's been added to the side there, it sits pretty snug, and at the back there I'll be able to plug weld it from underneath and plug weld these areas along the spine. So this area here was a bit odd. It had a bit of floor pan section just riveted into place just to hide this great big hole. What I did is I just templated this section out of a bit of cardboard and then transferred it into the section of pan that was removed. And here's the removed section of pan. What I've done is I've just flattened out these rolled edges here. I've plug welded all the little holes that were there for the rivets, and I've also just added a little section here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld this panel into position, and then at the front here, well, I've got a rotten section, so that section here needs to come out. And then what I can do is I can then reinstall this panel here in its correct position. So what I've done is I've started to weld in this rear section here along with this little repair section in front of it. So before I weld those panels in and I run out of memory on my camera, I would like to address the section on the front of the floor. So what I need to do is cut out this front section of floor pan and replace it, but before I do that I need to disconnect the accelerator, disconnect the clutch cable and remove this pedal assembly. So I've just disconnected the 8mm barrel nut there and fed the accelerator cable through, and on the underside I've just unwound the clutch cable wing nut. And while I was at the back, it just reminded me of something. So the other day I found myself at Old's Car Market again, getting some ideas for the rear area of BedBug. And while I was there, I did manage to get some footage of the yard. So what I'll do is I'll leave that at the very end of this video. So what I've just done in here is unbolted the pedal assembly. I also marked, templated the holes here so I could transfer these onto the new pan. These are for the side of the pedal assembly that allow it to bolt down. And then what I've done is roughly cut out the area and then use a splitting chisel along these edges here to remove any of the old material. And then I've unbolted the pan underneath here where it goes underneath the heater channel. And with the new section of pan, what I've done is use that cardboard template here just to drill the two holes for the pedal assembly. I've then gone round and I've hole punched these edges here, which will be welded to the spine. I've notched this front area here so it can sit nice and snug at the front there on that panel. And then what I've also done is I've bare metaled this area here and just covered it in zinc, as when this is sandwiched between the rubber seal and the heater channel, it is prone to rust and I won't be able to get any paint on this area, so I thought I'd better treat it with something. And all I've done with this back edge, well, I've just trimmed it to where I want it to be. And of course you could also run a flanged edge across here if you want a better fit. And now this pan's in position, all I need to do is plug weld those holes along here, along the spine, and then I was just going to weld across here and on the underside. And on the underside of the panel, all I need to do is rebolt this section into position. And then what I can do is just weld this area here and just along here as well. So when it comes to floor pans, not very exciting, but very important. And overall, I'm pretty chuffed with how this is actually turned out. I did manage to save pretty much all of the old panels and only just had to replace this front one here. But these panels are now in position and I do need to carry on with the welding. So I've got some great news. We have actually hit 2,000 subscribers now, and it's all thanks to you guys for watching. I really do appreciate it. So at this point, you guys probably get the idea about floor pans on Beetles. I've got a load of work. I've got to carry on welding, but I'm going to leave the video here for today. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!